What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode. We have a lot of fun things to talk about in this one, including the new features of this update that happened a few weeks ago to Final Cut Pro 10. Version number is 10.4.4. So let's dive into it. We're going to start off with a little keynote. I'm going to talk about some of the new features there, and then we'll go into some demos and some other cool things. As always, please post in the chat any questions or comments that you have about this stream. You can also always send them to Final Cut Pro help@me.com, and that's another way for us to talk back and forth, a little bit more private if you send the email. That way it doesn't have to be public to everyone in the chat there. So let's start off with the keynote here. Like we do with every stream, just a quick overview of what we're going to see in this episode. This is episode 9, and we just got the update 10.4.4 a few weeks ago. So we're going to talk about all the new features included with that update. So we're going to start off with what's new. I'm going to do an overview of some of those new features just in this keynote. Then we'll demo those features in Final Cut Pro live. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. You never know with the new features. And then I do have some questions that have been coming in throughout the past month or so. So we're going to end with a Q&A. Like I said just a minute ago, please post any questions you have right now into the comments, into the chat, and I'll try to answer those live as well. So what is new with Final Cut Pro 10? So we're going to do just kind of an overview here. So one of the biggest features that they put on the top of this list when you open Final Cut is the workflow extensions. And these essentially extend the capabilities of Final Cut Pro using third-party apps and extensions. So essentially, developers who are not Apple can now make apps that are almost built into Final Cut. And we're going to see one of those in the demo later. And these apps have access to more features of Final Cut, really makes them a lot more powerful. So if you think of apps you had previously, you might have to export or share your footage and your project out of Final Cut to do something with another app. Maybe it was color correcting or publishing it, sharing it. And then you'd have to either export it from that app and bring it back into Final Cut. And there were a lot of steps to it. Final Cut made some of those things easy, but it still wasn't as easy as it could be. So now apps like Frame.io, you have Shutterstock, CatDV, there's a bunch of different apps now that are able to utilize these extensions and the features that are in Final Cut to both control Final Cut and also use the media and the various features of those extensions. So one we're going to see a little bit later is Frame.io being demoed. That allows you to collaborate with others very easily. And it worked really well before, but now you actually get the app right in Final Cut. So we'll see a little demo of that later. Another feature that's new to this version is the batch share option. And this one has been requested by a lot of people, but this allows you to export and also transcode multiple clips from the browser or even multiple projects at the same time. So instead of having to share one file, wait a little bit, share another file, you can set up a batch to share a whole bunch of various projects and clips all at once, which is very nice. And then there's a new noise reduction filter built in to help reduce and kind of eliminate some of that noise that you get in either lower light video but also lower quality video. And we'll see a little demo of that later. This also works not only on standard video, but also 360 video clips. You can apply that filter as well, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of new 360 transitions and other things included with this one. And then some might never use this, but the little timecode window that you have, you've always been able to see your timecode in the interface, but now you actually have a window that pops out that allows you to view that timecode for either your project, but also your source clips. Which is pretty cool, especially if you're used to working on films and working with dailies. A lot of times you'll need the time code and want to be taking notes. So having a separate window that you can resize, you can actually resize this window to make the time code much, much larger. So either you as the editor can see it larger, or someone maybe sitting behind you taking notes can now see that window, which is a very nice option that you have there. So those are the 4 features they highlight, but if you hit that complete feature list button, there's definitely a lot of other features included with this update. So one of those is a comparison viewer, which if you are color correcting can make things much easier because you can save certain frames throughout your project and then use those as reference frames while you're grading or coloring another clip. So we'll see that. There's a new Tiny Planet mapping option for 360 video. So if you put a 360 clip into a standard project, you can actually resize it and make it into the Tiny Planet effect. If you haven't seen that, we'll see that in the demo as well. And it's as pretty much as simple as you could want it to be, in my opinion. So we'll see that in the demo. They've also included the SRT closed caption format. And before you could export and use the ITT format and then the CEA 608 format. Great formats, but SRT is probably one of the most used formats. So that's one I'm glad that they've brought and included that. This goes out to places like Facebook, and I know YouTube uses it. So very nice to see them adding additional formats for the closed captioning. And then mentioned it a minute ago, but they do have new 360 transitions. So they are, they added the ability to edit and use 360 video inside of Final Cut, and they didn't just stop there. They continue to add more effects, transitions, and other things to utilize 360 video, because I don't think that's going away. I think that is here to stay. So again, there's other features and other things that are new and a lot of bug fixes and various tweaks to Final Cut. So I recommend going to the release notes. If you go to Apple's website, you can see a complete list of what's new. There's an article number that goes along with that, which is HT201237, and I'll show that that article as well in just a second. So let's dive in. We'll look at the demo here, and let me close out this little window here. And so yeah, we're here inside of Final Cut Pro. Again, this is version 10.4.4. So as you expect, it is the latest version there that's been updated and released. I want to show one thing though before diving into these features, because getting the latest update, playing with all these things is really cool, but it can come with some issues if you're not careful with it. So let me show you a couple things here. First is those release notes I was talking about. And again, if you go to support.apple.com/HT201237, that's that article number, you'll get a whole list of everything that's new here. But don't just jump to those new features. Make sure that you back up your current version of Final Cut Pro 10 before you dive in and do the update. Most of you may have already done the update, and that's fine, but it's really important that you do make a backup of the application itself, because this lets you save that version. So if you are on, say, version 10.3 or a previous version, you can save that app just by making a little zip file. It takes 2 seconds. It's really quick, and that'll let you save that app and that version. So if you need to go back to a previous version, you can do it really easily by backing up and making the copies of those applications. You can do the same thing with your library, and you can archive your projects here. They give you all the steps to do that. I strongly recommend doing that before you make any updates. Even if you're backing up your computer with Time Machine or using another method to create a backup, just doing these extra little steps is just really important. If you're an editor, especially if you're in the middle of a project, which we usually don't recommend updating when you're in the middle of a project, but if you are, make these backups. It'll save you in the long run. And then in addition to that article, there is the what's new in Final Cut Pro 10, and that's this article here. And so this will give you a more detailed list of all of those features. Again, I'm going to try to cover the majority of them, but if you want to see all the little tweaks that happened, you can go through here and see all of those little changes that they've made to this version, and not just the highlights, but everything that's really detailed. And then, like we said, we were looking at the release notes a second ago. This really goes into detail, labeling all of the fixes and all the little minor adjustments that have been made there. Cool. So that's the kind of the preview to all this that I wanted to show. And now we'll get into some actual demos and show off some of the features that are here now that you have a backup of your app, maybe you've updated and you're ready to go. So the first one, the major change, is those third-party extensions. So I have the frame.io app installed on my computer here, and you'll notice up on the toolbar next to our background tasks and keywords, we now have a Frame.io extension button up here. And this will come up too when you have other apps and other extensions installed. You'll see these buttons now show up for you to be able to open up those extensions and go into it. So Frame.io is probably one of my favorite apps to use to collaborate with other people. They just have made it so nice working with notes and everything else. So when you click on the Frame.io button, it'll load that extension here. And I just have the demo projects included here. So when you first sign up for an account, you can sign up for a trial. You'll see these same demo projects created. And the way the project works, when you open it, you'll see all of the media for that project. And what Frame.io does really well is they allow you to comment and collaborate. So you can share these projects with other people. You can see there's a little V2 version 2 tag on these. So these have been updated. But this specific one here has notes on it. So I can actually double click on this specific project. I see it. And then I also see all the notes that have been placed onto it. It even puts a time code for where the note is, which is pretty cool. So if you know you need to make corrections at specific portions of your video, you can actually tag notes on them, and it'll show up in the when you're playing back, and you can add the notes in here. I mean, all this is done right in this little Frame.io window, but we haven't left Final Cut Pro. We're still in the Final Cut Pro app, which is great. So that's a way to view media. You can then interact with media as well. So if there's a clip in here you need to put into your project, you can actually go onto that clip and just click and drag it right onto into your browser here, and it'll go and add it. So we could add it to a specific event, and it'll go and add it. So let's just put it into the museums event. Why not? And I'm just going to drop it. This is the first time that I'm importing this asset, so it lets me know and asks me what quality I want. So one thing that Frame.io does really well is they make a whole bunch of different proxy files in addition to the full quality version. So I could say I want the full quality version, or maybe I just need the proxy. We're editing offline for now, so I can just do that, hit import. We see the little check in the extension itself in Frame.io here, and then that clip should show up here in my browser. So we can go and use that. And it works the other way around too. I mean, that's one of the things I think that makes this really nice is if I want to put a clip onto Frame.io and upload it, I can do that as well. So I can go in here, find one of my clips, just click and drag, drop it onto the Frame.io extension, and there you can see it's uploading that file and sharing it then. So if this project is shared with others, they now get access to that clip. And doing it with individual clips is nice, and I think if you're sharing maybe dailies or sharing video to other people, that's a great way to do it. But being able to share projects is probably the most powerful thing that I've seen. So here's this project that I have here, this D1 extensions. I can click and drag that as well, drop that, and now I'm sharing that project to others. So that's a way to do that as well, which is pretty cool. And actually, I said that wrong. With this one, with projects, you actually want to do it through the share option. So you hit the share menu here. Let me move this out of the way. Hit the share menu, and then you can choose how you want to share it. So I'll share an H.264 version. Hit next, and then this is the extension built in. You might not have seen this used here. So for projects, do it through share. You get the options here. You can share the entire timeline, which would be the full project, or you can upload every individual clip. And you can actually do both of these as well. So in this case, I just want the timeline, so that's fine. I want to include the to-do markers. I'll check that off, and I'm going to add it just to the demo project here because that's fine. That's the one we want. So hit upload. It goes through the upload process through there. So clips, you just drag into the extension, and it'll upload. And then for projects, select the project in the browser, use the share menu, and then export it either as the H.264 version, or you can export it as the source. So if you know you want full quality source material, you can do that. Otherwise, H.264 is there as well. The only thing kind of to throw out there, and you want to do a little bit of research on this, but Frame.io, you do get a certain amount of storage on there. So sending it out as H.264 might save you some space. And if you're reaching the limit of the amount of space you have on Frame.io, that can be a way to give you a smaller file to be able to share and collaborate if you don't have one of the larger amount of storage options with Frame.io. So cool. So this one then is shared. it's uploaded here. We can see it bouncing up and down. It's going through and processing and generating those thumbnails. And we'll see if we can double click on it. Yeah, I think it's still working. We'll give it a minute there and see. But the only other thing I want to show here with this extension, yeah, it's almost done, is when you go and share it, if you've added markers to your project, you can see back here on the timeline, I've added these to-do markers. Those share over and are then available as comments on Frame.io, which makes it really easy to go through and take notes or check something. So especially if you're working as an editor, maybe you're collaborating with a producer or a director who's going to go and view this, you can have all your comments made right on the project that you're editing. And then when they go in and view it in Frame.io, they're going to see those comments as well. So notice here are the 3 comments that I've added. See, it's got my name on it. I put in the comment that I wanted to hear. So do you like this video? What's the cat's name? Those little goofy comments there. They could go and make all of these changes. They could comment on them. And that's your way of collaborating back and forth. So we're doing it all here with the extension built into Final Cut Pro 10. They might be doing it from the Frame.io iOS app on their iPhone or through the internet, just on Frame.io. But you get all that control now right here built into Final Cut with the ability of having those extensions. So that's one of the major feature updates in this version. I could go through a whole number of other extensions that are available, like we were seeing with Shutterstock and some of the other ones. And this is just the infancy of it. I'm sure we're going to see many more extensions come out in the future. But for right now, Frame.io is one of the big ones there. So the next one I want to show is batch share. So with the same project here, if we go up to the share menu, we do have an option to share out just like we normally would have. We can also see if I go up to the file menu, we get share. That's exactly how everything's been before. But now what we get, if I select a couple projects here, just click, shift click, I can go up to file, and now we get the option that says share 3 projects to either compressor or out using one of these destinations. So in doing that, I'm able to select either multiple projects, or you can do the same thing if you have multiple clips. Let me zoom out of these clips here. Zoom down. If I select a whole bunch of clips here, I can go up to file and share all 9 of those clips that I selected. Or you might have 100 clips. You might have a whole bunch of dailies you want to compress and convert into a different format. You can do that here from the file menu, just sharing all of those out. And in addition to that, if you go into preferences, you have your destination option. You can create a new bundle, which this allows you to bundle multiple formats. So let's say I created a bundle there. I might want to share, let's just say, as a Facebook option and a Vimeo option. But most of the time, yeah, I don't have an account, that's fine. But now if I share to this bundle, if I had 9 clips selected and I shared to that bundle, it would export all of them for Facebook and Vimeo all at the same time. So before, you had to select one project at a time or one clip at a time, say share, and then share to a specific format, or share it to a bundle where it would share to different formats. But it was only sharing that one project or that one clip. And in this version, you can now combine sharing all into one motion by selecting all those and then saying share. So it saves a lot of time if you're sharing and exporting multiple projects very frequently. It definitely saves a ton of time there. So the next one I want to show you is the noise reduction filter that is included, which you can essentially apply this to some clips. So I have this, I think it's a 720p clip here of some fireworks. So it is nighttime. It's lower resolution. It's not it's not the cleanest shot here. So with the clip selected, just go into your effects browser, and you can do a search for it. Just type in noise, and you're going to see a noise reduction filter. You can see here I have a third-party noise reduction effect here built in, but you want just the one that says noise reduction, and we're going to click and drag this onto the clip, or you can just double-click if it's selected. And what you may have seen, I'll move it around here, you can see in the lower left corner it says processing noise reduction, of the viewer. So it is something that takes some time. It needs some rendering time to go through and actually process and remove that reduction or do that noise reduction. But I don't know how well you're going to see it here on the stream, but let me uncheck it here. I'm going to say before and after. And let's go up here. I'm going to zoom way in close just to part of this, and we'll do it right here. So just watch kind of around this area, just in the middle there. So this is before. You might be able to see the little blocking and the little kind of the grain that it puts onto that clip. So that's before, and then we'll check the box to do after. And before, and then after. So it's smoothed out a lot of this area here, and that's what the noise reduction is designed to do. It can't make your video all of a sudden perfect. It's just going to take the data that it has, the information that's there, and try to process it to make it look a little bit better and a little bit smoother, which I'm finding in most cases it does a nice job of getting rid of that noise. I'm thinking, I've seen this actually with a lot of people where they are thinking it's going to do something, just all of a sudden make it look like it was shot during the day or something. I mean, it's not going to be a miracle. It's not going to save you if you've been way off in the way that you're shooting things and the footage that you have. But definitely for these subtle changes, I find it helps a lot. And the couple other tips that Apple recommends and I've found works really well is just play with these settings that are in here. For the amount of noise reduction you're going to do, you get 4 settings right now. Just go through and try changing these. You might find that doing the max amount of noise reduction is too much. Here it actually, I would say, did a pretty good job. I mean, you can see how even these little flares that we're getting from the firework itself are getting reduced as well, but it's making a lot of this area smoother. And then we have the amount of sharpness that we want. So you can change this and kind of mess with this. I find maximum, you can see how close it did on this clip. Let's actually zoom out. I'm going to do Shift Z here. So this is before the noise reduction, and then after. Notice with that sharpness, it really took away a lot of the smoothing, and all of a sudden we have all these really sharp edges on the fireworks. So you might not want to do that, but again, play with these, try them out. You can always click on the little button here on the right and say reset parameter to reset it back to the changes that you've made. The other tip that they recommend doing is that if you are applying multiple effects to a clip, let's say I'm going to do let's do a look here. Clear out my search. Maybe we're going to do the 50s TV look. Why not? But they say that if you're going to apply multiple effects, make sure that the noise reduction is applied first, meaning that it's on the top of this list of effects. If I click and drag the 50s TV above the noise reduction, what that means is that the order matters. What it means is that the 50s TV effect is being applied before the noise reduction happens, and that might give you unexpected results. It might not be the best performance out of Final Cut. It might cause some issues. So make sure to always have this noise reduction effect or filter at the top, at least at the start. You can go and change it later on, but I strongly recommend putting that at the top just because that's what Apple recommends, and that's what I've seen work really well in the few times that I've used it so far this month or the past couple weeks. So that is the noise reduction effect in being used. And then let me go over to this timeline here, this project, because I want to show the timecode windows that have now been added. Because like I said earlier, you've always had this little timecode in the center underneath the viewer to show you what your current timecode is. And this is either showing you the playhead timecode, or if you're using the skimmer here, you'll see the skimmer timecode show up there. But what's new is you can go up to the window menu and you can click on project timecode or source timecode. And if we click project timecode, here's our project timecode window. This one is basically this same little window, or the same timecode viewer that you've always had, just now in a bigger window. So we can resize this. I actually haven't tested it. Let's see if I go. Yeah, this might be the largest I can make it. I don't know. Oh, no, it does let me go all the way out. So you can make that basically as wide as your screen is, and then you'll see that time code show up, which is pretty, I don't know if you need it that big on your primary screen, but you might have a secondary display you want to put that on, which is nice. And there's not too much to this little window. I mean, that's it. This is the time code. You can use the little drop down here to change the background. So it might be distracting being able to see through it. So if you do solid, now you can see it's not showing any transparency to what's behind it. Or if you want more transparency, you can take it down to 50%. So again, a couple options for that. And then I think the other thing you can do, is you can right click or control click on the time code and copy it. So especially if you're taking notes and you want to copy and paste that into a document somewhere, just say copy, and then you can go and paste that later on. So that is the project timecode window. Let's shrink it down. We'll just put it right here. And the other one, which gives you even more, is the source timecode, which I've had click on that. Very similar. You can resize the window and change the background colors if you want. But you can also choose what time codes show up in this little window here. So there's a couple options here. We get the list of our clips here, right? So there's 3 clips, and you can see them here. Let me shrink down the window or the clips here. All right, so here's the 3 clips, and obviously very straightforward. You have the big cat in the back here. There's a black cat in a little window here, and then a lazy cat sitting on the chair. So there's our 3 clips. Depending on how you've marked these clips, if you've selected them and marked them with a specific role, you'll get the color code, just like you normally would, and that'll show up in the timecode viewer as well. And you can change this. You can say you want to see the clip roles and the project timecode. We can get more of that information in here. So instead of having a separate timecode window, you just have the one window, and it'll show you everything. So pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not too much to the timecode window, but this has been a much requested feature of Final Cut Pro 10, just because having this and being able to see this timecode for many editors and other users of Final Cut has been really important. So I strongly recommend that you go in and use that and try that out if you have not yet, because that's a great thing to have inside of Final Cut and being very specific with your footage. So so that is the timecode windows that are included with this update. And let's see, the next feature, we're going to dive down into some of those smaller features that aren't necessarily something that you'll use all the time, but are still things that for the people that are using them are very important. So let me switch over to the next project, because we're going to talk about the tiny planet effect, which I think is a fun one. It's pretty cool. So we have a standard project, just a couple of photos, and then a 360 video here on the end. This project is just a normal one. It's not a 360 video. If we select the project, let me go into the project settings here. Notice this is a 1920 by 1080 project. It's not 360. That's the key with this. If you're going to use this effect, you do need to go in and make sure that it is a standard project. And then when you add your 360 clip to that project, which I have one here, and you can see just as clouds and not much to it. If you've followed on Instagram and other places, you will have seen this effect. But with that put on, just go into your inspector, and you're going to see it under orientation. There's a mapping option here. So let me make sure the clip is selected. Mapping is normal. I'm going to change that to Tiny Planet. And you'll notice when I do that, we get our field of view and everything else on here. It doesn't look like a tiny planet now because of how it's set up, but I can just click on the 360 tool, and I can move this around, and now we're creating the tiny planet effect. I can change the field of view to go in closer or further away. And again, I can tilt and be very specific about how this is set up here. So if I want to rotate around, whatever effect you want to create with that. So again, just place the 360 video onto a standard project's timeline, select the clip, open the inspector, and change the orientation mapping to Tiny Planet from normal. And that'll give you the option. So there's our standard, and if we change it to Tiny Planet, there's Tiny Planet, and I can scrub through it, and you can see that's the Tiny Planet effect. So this is something, this was shot outdoors. This is going to work best with outdoor content, but definitely go through and play with this effect. I think it's a pretty cool one that you have options and be able to use there. So that's the Tiny Planet effect that's included with this update. And then for all of you that are color correcting content, this is one, I think they can still make this a little bit better, but this is something that I find very helpful. So if you're trying to color correct between multiple clips, it can be helpful to see those other clips. Anyone that's a colorist or does any kind of color work knows this. So if you go up to the window menu and go under Show in Workspace, there's now an option here for the comparison viewer. Control-Command-6 is the shortcut. And what the comparison viewer lets you do, you can see it here on the left side, it allows you to save frames of your project. So if I've gone through and color corrected this clip, I can hit the Save Frame button, just hitting that plus, and now it's saved that frame of the video. So I can go through, continue to edit, and then maybe I'm editing or color correcting this clip, so I'm using the color tools. Maybe I'm going to go and use a color wheel. I can use all those tools here in Final Cut while I still have this saved frame. And then when I'm ready, I can hit Save Frame again. Now I've saved this frame of this cat, and I can go back here and I can color this third clip of this cat. So I can go through and make changes while viewing the saved frames that I've put in there. And I can go up here and I can click on the frame browser in the comparison viewer, and this will show me those saved frames. So I can see I have the first clip and the second clip, and while I'm clicking through those, I'm still coloring this third video. So that's what the comparison viewer is for. It's for saving those frames so that you can go through and see those frames and be able to use them as references. Before, you had to kind of jump back and forth between clips, and that was not efficient. It was just not the way that you'd wanted to be coloring. So that's the comparison viewer there. I usually, in the little bit I've been using this, I've always used it on the save framed. I like to be very deliberate about the frames I'm saving and comparing to. But you can click on timeline and use this as a way to go to the next or previous edits and view it that way as well if you want to. But I find using save frame is really nice. You do have a limit. You can only save, I believe, 30 frames in here. So when you're done with these frames, just click on them and hit the delete key, and you can remove those frames from there. The last tip here about the comparison viewer is you do get, and you'll use this all the time when you're coloring, you'll usually go up here and bring up the video scopes for the shot that you're working on. And we might get rid of the browser and just give us some space. You can go up here under View and say Video Scopes for the comparison viewer. And you can get those and use those as well. And that'll let you compare shots over multiple frames, and a really nice way to work with them. So that is the comparison viewer, new to this version of Final Cut Pro 10. The next thing I want to show, let me go Command-0. I'm going to go back to, oops, if I can hit the right button, Command-0. We're going to go back to the default layout here. I'm going to bring up the Captions project. So like I mentioned earlier, one of the other new features to Final Cut Pro 10.4.4 is the SRT format. So before we used ITT or maybe the CEA 608 format. Now you can go into the roles section. Right now you see we have ITT, but maybe I want to use the new one. So I'm going to hit Edit Roles. I have my Captions option here, and notice now we have an SRT option. So you can hit the plus if you don't see that and add SRT as an option. And SRT is just another format of captions that you can use. So if I wanted to move all of these, I can do this. I can actually add this one in, and then we'll add it. So let's add an SRT version. And I'm going to go roles. Why isn't it letting me do this one? See, it should be showing it. I think it is seeing it. Let's see if we get this. So I'm going to click on one of the captions, hit Command-A to select all of them. And then I'm right-clicking or control-clicking on one of the captions. And we get an option here that says Assign Caption Role. And then I can change this to the SRT. In this case, it is English, so I'll select English as the language there. And If you've played with captions at all, you've probably seen this message. Anytime you switch between formats, it's usually going to show you this message. When you convert between different formats of captions, you may find the captions don't look the same on the format you're converting to. So anytime you do this, make sure you go through and don't just share this and expect it to look the same. Like, make sure you verify if there's any errors that you're correcting them. Like in here, I have an overlapped caption, so I'll get rid of that. But make sure your captions validate correctly, but make sure they look good as well. I found some people have been converting these and assuming they're going to look correct or they might not be cut off, and that's not always the case. So make sure they're looking the way you want them to. Always verify that. Any change that you make, you should always go back and verify your project anyway. Cool, but when we go through here and then share the project, if we go under our settings, we see we have the options for captions there that we can include, and in your role options, you'll see that as well, and you can export those separately if you want those. I thought this was included in the past, in the previous versions, but one thing they've added as well is the ability to burn in captions. So let's say we want to share to our Apple devices. We can go under settings here, and we should see, I might be seeing it under captions here, but there's an option in here to burn those captioned in, which essentially means that they're going to be always seen on the screen. So if you do want to burn in the caption, you can do that, versus embedding, which in an embedded caption, which is usually used under the CEA format, embedded means that you can turn that on or off, which is usually the way I recommend going. That gives your audience the option. If they want captions, awesome, they turn it on. If not, they can turn that off. Whereas burn-in means that it's burned onto the video so that you always see that. It's as if it was included there. So that's buried in there as well, kind of under the little captions button there. Cool. That's all I have to say about the SRT format, but glad we're seeing that included and more features coming in. So some of the other smaller options that are in here, some of the other changes that we've seen. One is the ability to select clips or a storyline when dragging. And this is a small one, but I think this is actually very, very helpful. So here I have a project which has some clips on the timeline. Let me do Shift-Z just to zoom in. So I have some clips on the timeline down here, and I have a secondary storyline at the top with a couple of these bear shots here. And if I click and drag on the right here across these clips, notice it selects each of those clips, right? So I can select the last clip up to the first one if I wanted to. And this is something that's new because you could do that, or you can click on above this clip and click and drag around it, and notice it's selecting the entire secondary storyline there. So it selects all three of those clips in that storyline. So that's something that's new. You can either select individual clips by dragging essentially next to those clips, or if you drag above, it'll select the entire storyline. Very small workflow thing, but it can help out if you're trying to select things on there. In addition to that, if you have a clip selected and you go into your effects here, there's a new comic looks effects category here. So there's some new effects, and you can see in the viewer, the preview of that, what happens when I drag across each of these clips. Just ways to make your clips look more comic book-like, depending on which one you choose. And any of these, if you apply the effect itself, when it's applied, you can go up to the video inspector and you'll see that effect applied, and there's many, many more options that you can use to make adjustments to that. So don't hesitate, apply these filters. This is how you'll learn what's available in Final Cut. Go through and play with them, make adjustments to them, change the style, whatever you want to do with them. Don't forget you can go up and reset these effects at any time, but you can also save these effects as presets as well. If you want to save them for later, that you get that option as well in there. So that is another thing that's been added is those comic filters. I mentioned before there's new 360 transitions. So if you go into the transitions browser and click on 360, you'll see some of those. Again, not a whole lot of new transitions, but some new ones have been added. So especially if you're working with 360 projects, you will have that in there. And cool, so that's the comic book effect, the filters. This is another small change, but one that if you don't know is there, you'll probably never use this. But these titles, if you add a title on there, and when you're editing your titles, you have the title inspector here that you can go through and adjust. And a little change they made is when you're looking at your fonts, we can click and select a font. You can scroll through and see all the different fonts that are on here, which is great. But if you know there's a specific font you want, you can actually just start typing in the name of that font now. And so if I want Helvetica, I just type in HEL and it jumps down to Helvetica. I can hit return there and it selects that font. For any of you that have gone through and used fonts and titles and made changes, you can understand how scrolling through this entire list of fonts can get very tedious if you're doing it all the time. So now when you start typing in the name of the font, if you have this up, it'll go through and show you those fonts. So just typing in A jumps up to the top with those fonts, and we can see what we want and apply it. So that's another change that they've made to this version. Again, very small, and this is why I recommend looking at the release notes, because you'll see all of those changes on here. Cool. So the last thing I wanted to say, again, is just reiterating that you do want to go and look at those release notes, because you will see all the other little changes that they made and some of the bug fixes that have been on there. So like with this version, another small one that they made is there was an issue with keyframe navigation, because the buttons would actually disappear when you were adjusting the orientation, which again, you might look at that and not even notice that as being an issue, but that is something that was a problem, and they've corrected that in this version. They've also fixed some issues where the playhead would just move unexpectedly, kind of jump around different places. And those types of little changes or bugs, in my opinion, those are bugs that need to be fixed. Those come to light when you submit feedback. So if you ever see problems with Final Cut, doesn't matter what it is, whatever little issue that you're having with Final Cut, make sure to go up to the Final Cut Pro menu and click on Provide Final Cut Pro Feedback. This will take you into a form. Brought it up over here. Let me bring this here. It'll bring you to this form where you can then submit your feedback and what you see. Again, there's all kinds of different feedback you can give to Apple here, to the developers. But if it's a bug, something weird, or just even a concern that you have, maybe there's a feature you want to be added into Final Cut, submit the feedback by using this form, because that's what they use as developers. That's what they use to figure out what features are coming next. So you can post all you want on Facebook groups and other blogs, but give the feedback directly to Apple using those forms. One of the best ways to get changes to happen. So that's what I have to show of the update, the 10.4.4 update. I think those are some major changes in my opinion, especially this ability to have third-party extensions. I think the possibility is for that, and what we'll see in the future is going to be really cool. So this is just the beginning of that, and some other little changes. And so it's a pretty cool update, and I always look forward to those updates throughout the year. It's not 10.5, which a lot of people thought we were going to see at the Creative Summit just a couple weeks ago. We did get 10.4.4. So I think we're going to see some major changes coming in future versions. And as always, I'll do a live stream when those come out, and we'll talk about those features as well. But now I want to switch over from our demo here and do a little bit of Q&A. I know this was probably a little bit longer demo and all those features, so I'm going to try to keep the Q&A here a little bit shorter, but if you do have questions, don't hesitate. Put them in the comments here, and I'll definitely go through and try to answer those. Otherwise, contact me any way you want, whether it's through Facebook group, Final Cut Pro Help. You can do it through Twitter, Instagram, at Final Cut Pro Help, or commenting on any of the YouTube videos. That's always a way to get my attention. The most consistent way, though, to get a hold of me is through email with finalcutprohelp@b.com. And our first question comes from Leonard, who says that he wants to know how to move the playhead by a specific number of frames. And he sent this over via Twitter. He said I'm on at 12:06 as an example in the timeline, and he's doing some advanced keyframing. So he wants to move 30 frames ahead, to 1306 and then go back easily. So it's kind of going back and forth navigating on there with keyframes. And this is a really simple one. You just have to know these shortcuts. So you can always use the shortcut Control P, as in Peter, and Control P brings up your timecode entry form here. And then you can do either plus or minus on the keyboard. So in this case, he's wanting to jump 30 frames ahead and then go back 30 frames. So I'm going to hit the plus key to go ahead, and which is actually the equals key, but same one there. But I'd say plus 30, 30, and then hit the return key. And that's going to jump me 30 frames ahead. And then when I want to go back, I'll hit minus 30, return, and now I've jumped back 30 frames. So that's your way to do that. You don't need to do Control P. That's just a way to get into the timecode entry. But if we want to jump, I could just have the playhead here and say minus 30, return, or plus 30, return, and it's moving 30 frames either forward or backwards. This project, I believe, is a 24 frames per second project. Yeah, I can see 22, 23, and then we go to the next one. So that's why when I do plus 30, it actually puts in 106 because it's 1 second and 6 frames is the equivalent of 30 frames in this project. So if you were wondering, that's why you're seeing those numbers on there. Anytime you can hit the escape key. So if you do hit plus to go into the timecode entry and you decide you don't want to do that, just hit escape and you'll jump out of that. And then again, if something's selected and you do plus or minus, we're actually moving that clip. So if you do minus 30, I'm moving this title back 30 frames. So if something's selected, Control P will get you into the plus or minus for the playhead itself. So that's why I threw out that shortcut for Control P. So hopefully that answers that question for you. And then next one, I just want to throw out a little plug here for a video, which I find is really cool. So we're going to go to twitter.com/FinalCutProHelp. And this is the Final Cut Pro Help Twitter feed. You can go on here to see updates like the live stream happening now, or there's different daily shortcuts. But I've pinned at the top here this Off the Tracks documentary, which is all about Final Cut Pro 10. Bradley Olson did this one, and he did surprisingly a really good job with this documentary. Some people, when it comes to talking about Final Cut, always think things are not going to be great, but it is actually a really good documentary, and it's covering the transition from the legacy Final Cut Pro 7 and previous versions into Final Cut Pro 10, and it shows the buildup of Final Cut, how it got to where it was, and then what happened with transitioning to Final Cut Pro 10, and shows some other things. And I just find this documentary to be really important if you're using Final Cut Pro 10, just to understand the history. Obviously, you don't need to know the history to use Final Cut and to use it, but for some of the things that you do in Final Cut 10, and even some of the shortcuts, there's reasons that they are the way they are. And a lot of times looking at this documentary and kind of understanding what the older versions were can help out in your understanding with it. So if you do go to the Twitter page here, again, twitter.com/FinalCutProHelp, and click on the link here, you can view a trailer of it through iTunes, and you can even do a purchase of it through there as well, or renting it. $10 to buy, $5 to rent. So you do get those options here through that. But I would go on and take a look at it. They interview some pretty cool people. And I think for anyone using Final Cut, it's a documentary I'd recommend checking out. If you do use the link here on Twitter as well, just being fully transparent, that helps me out as well. If you do end up paying for it, I get a little commission from that. I don't think it's that much to do anything, but if you do want to buy it, go use that link, and that'll help support this channel. And then let's move on to question 3 here. So this question comes from a Facebook group. And actually, I saw this one earlier today, just like an hour ago. So let me shrink down here. And I hope the audio comes through here, but this is the question that I saw. Yeah, I don't think the audio is coming through here. So let me show you what this guy is doing. So he's saying he's dragging this transition out from the transition browser, right on the right side. And you'll notice when he gets onto his timeline, there's a little do not disturb symbol or do not pass there. So he can't put the transition at the beginning or the end of this clip. He's only able to drop it onto the clip itself, which if you've added a transition at any time in Final Cut to a clip, if he were to do this, it's going to add it both to the beginning and the end of that transition. It's not going to add it either at the start or the end. It's going to add it to both sides. So essentially he's adding two transitions at once. And he's wondering why that's happening. So let me show you. So if we go into Final Cut Pro, let me go down here. I have a new project I've created. And this essentially shows you the project that he has. So he just had an audio clip on his primary storyline. And he has a video clip. I just have a still image on the top here, but he has a still image there. And then in transitions, he was using one of the stylized transitions. I think he was using, the slide left, right? So if we click and drag this transition over, notice there's that symbol there. There's that kind of do not pass symbol. So if I were to drop this transition right here, nothing happens. It goes back. It can't apply to anything. If I were to drop it onto the clip, then we're okay. But if we go to the beginning, we're not here. So let me show you. If I drop it onto the clip, boom, it adds the transition to the beginning and the end. We don't want that. I'm going to hit Command-Z. And essentially what he was trying to do is add it just to the beginning or the end. So here's the reason we're getting the kind of that do not pass symbol, is if I were to drop it here, there's nothing for this transition to lock onto. Because if you notice, on the audio clip, there's a transition at the beginning and the end of this audio clip already. If I were to delete this transition and go and drag this on, now we get the plus because there's no transition on the audio clip down there. So it would just, wherever I dropped it here, it just assumes that I want to apply it to the end of that video clip. And I could drop it there and it would put it there. So that's the first part of this. That's why that do not, kind of that circle with a line through it symbol is showing up, because there was already transitions in every place that this would kind of latch onto. And then as far as going for the beginning and the end, this clip that's on the timeline is by itself. It's its own clip. It's not in a storyline. And that's the key. So what we actually need to do is put this clip into a storyline, and then we can add that transition. So you can select the clip and either right-click on it and say Create Storyline, or just use Command-G. I find this is actually a shortcut I'm using pretty frequently. So with it selected, I'll just do Command-G. And now if I drag that same transition over, I can drop it on the end of it if I want to, or the beginning, and it applies it as this person was expecting to happen. So again, just looking back at his original question here, because he couldn't figure it out. If we drag it over, you can see in the video he's got just one clip on the primary storyline, and this connected clip is not in its own storyline, so that's why he can't add it to this. If he kept going over to the left side here, this clip is in a storyline. He would actually be able to add it to that clip on the left, but that's the reason he can't put it on this one, is because there's no... It's not in a storyline, which is what's required for those transitions to be applied there. And then the audio clip below it must have had transitions on it. That's why you got the little do not disturb symbol there. So that's that question. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, if you have anything like that, don't hesitate. Send it to finalcutprohelpme.com, and I'll try to answer it for you. This next one, not so much a question, but just a reminder to make a backup. I know I said it earlier today, before you do an update to Final Cut, it's always important to make a backup of your app and even your system itself. But any work that you do on a computer and any electronic device, really anything, anywhere, you should make a backup of it if it's something that's important. And the reason I wanted to call this out is I was working with Gary through Facebook, and he had a failing drive, and not a big deal. I think for Gary, it was fine because he had a backup, right? So we were able to figure out that he had a failing hard drive, which was causing all kinds of weird kind of behaviors on his computer, because he'd be working, normally editing, and then all of a sudden he'd get some weird artifacts showing up on his video clips in the viewer. He even had some clips disappear from his browser here when he was browsing through his event, and all kinds of weird, just little issues that, for some people, they might look at them as little glitches and no big deal, but he was seeing more and more of them. And that's where we discovered then that he did have a failing hard drive, and that was causing all of his problems. So that's something that's no big deal. He was under warranty. He was able to go to Apple, and they were able to get that replaced for him and do the service for him. But that's the thing, if these projects and this data of all these videos were on that hard drive only and there was no backup, I would have had to give him that news that, hey, get this stuff off of here. Like, you're losing data, and if anything, it's going to get much worse before the drive completely fails, and you never know when that happens. So luckily for him, he had a backup. It was no big deal. He got the drive replaced, was able to restore everything and keep going. But that's where I just wanted to kind of always throw out there, if you're not creating a backup, make one. You can go into System Preferences. There's a built-in app on your Mac called Time Machine, and Time Machine is designed to make an entire copy of everything that's on your computer. It gives you a little layout here of what it's going to do. All you need is an external hard drive to make that backup happen. Right now on this computer, I have an 8 terabyte USB 3 hard drive. I believe it's a Seagate drive. I think I got it through Amazon. This is an older drive, though. I got it probably a year and a half ago. And 8 terabytes of storage, and I got it for, I think, $130. I mean, it was very inexpensive for the amount of space I got. That backs up this computer, an external RAID. That's a lot of storage, and it's very inexpensive. To do data recovery is so much more expensive, and you can lose information. It's time-consuming, all kinds of issues. So if you don't think it's worth it, that's fine. Just understand the consequences that happen when your data is not backed up. Think of it like printing something out on paper. Maybe you have a picture that you printed. If that was the only copy of that picture and you lost it, that's the same thing here with the projects you're editing. If you're not saving them, very easy to lose them. So that's why you should back up. And then in addition to making a backup, because of what he was dealing with there and some other people I was working with, I wanted to do a refresher on troubleshooting with Final Cut and just seeing some of those steps. If you go into Safari or whatever your web browser of choice is, mine is Safari here, just do a search for resolve an issue with Final Cut Pro. And when you do that search, you're going to see a couple things. You should see this first article here, resolve an issue with Final Cut Pro 10. You might also see my video here, Final Cut Pro 10, resolve an issue, which goes over the same things that we're going to talk about here. But it goes over this article. And so many people have contacted me, and they haven't followed some basic troubleshooting steps, and that's what this article takes you through. Again, resolve an issue with Final Cut Pro 10. And if you watch the video, I explain in a little bit more detail kind of what these steps are and reasons to go through them, so you can check that out on this YouTube channel. But just go through these steps. I mean, even if there's nothing wrong with your computer, kind of take a look at these steps so that you understand what the troubleshooting is when you do run into an issue. There's so many people that I find say, oh, just go through and delete your preferences and delete your plists, and that'll resolve it. But if you look at the troubleshooting steps, that's actually step 11. That's one of the last steps that is recommended by Apple, who are the developers of this app. I mean, they know this app inside and out. And although, yes, I do find that this is a frequent and very easy way to fix a lot of issues by resetting the preferences, it's not always it's not actually fixing the problem that's there. So I recommend just going through these. I mean, you might find just restarting your Mac is all that it takes to fix an issue. And if you went through and deleted your preferences, you're going to lose settings that you've set up for Final Cut and other little things. And just doing a restart might have fixed it. So make sure that you go through these steps and try them out, because they can be much more helpful than just deleting preferences or just doing one of the steps that's way down on the list. If you go through these in the correct order, it can definitely help out there. So that's just a refresher I wanted to throw out there. We did have an issue that came in through Twitter that I was going back and forth through on DMs, and what was happening is this person actually had a bad font installed, and that font was causing all kinds of weird issues on his computer. So by going through and using these steps and following them, we were able to find out what was happening. So in this case, for that, because it was a bad font, we didn't figure out what the issue was until we got down to step 9 here. We actually tried in a different user account, and that font was not installed on that other user account, and so that let us know what was happening. We didn't know in step 9 exactly what was wrong, but we knew in the other user account it was fine, so that meant something in this primary user account was the cause of it. So we then were able to dig down and see what he had installed and put on there, and it turned out to be that font. So cool. So that's just a refresher on resolving. I didn't wanted to do a little demo here. Let's go into shaving. And I wanted to talk about a transition that's included with Final Cut Pro 10, which is the flow transition. If you've not used this one, it's you can just click on all, do a search for flow, you'll find it in there. This one I've been seeing used more and more as a way to cover up jump cuts. A jump cut is something that I just can't stand at all when I was going through school for all this. I mean, it was just like, that was like the worst thing you could do with it. So here we have this guy going through and shaving, right? And we don't need this whole clip. So I'm going to hit B to get my blade tool, and I'm going to cut out most of this clip here. Hit A to switch back and delete this little section. So now if I play this little clip through, there he's shaving, right? Going through, and then boom, we jump over, because we're essentially going from this side, and we jump to this other part. So that's our jump cut, right? So a new transition that's included is the flow transition. Not new to this version, but newer. And you can just add this transition in between those two clips. And essentially what that's going to try and do is cover up or remove that jump cut. I'm going to force Final Cut here to render, just so that we see it as it is when it's rendered. If it did that, it did not render it. There we go, render, I'll get that rendered. So now if we play that clip, just hitting the space bar here, it switches over. And let me go through frame by frame through this transition. And what you'll see, it's gonna be hard to tell, but just right in here, it's not actually a dissolve, right? You see all this bending and weird stuff happen. Because it's actually a flow transition. You can see even right here as the razor, the blue razor, it's bent, and it's kind of like really weirdly being transformed into this clip. So again, if I play it again, the flow transition goes in and switches over that. So that's the point of the flow transition is to essentially merge those two clips so that you kind of hide that jump cut. The clip itself, the flow transition, is 6 frames in length. So again, if we go through this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's how long that transition is. You should not change the time or the duration of the flow transition. If you do, let me zoom in here, we'll make it a little bit longer. If you do, it becomes just a normal cross dissolve. See, just normal cross dissolve. The only difference is it's a freeze frame. So make sure that when you apply the flow transition to try and hide a jump cut, to keep it at 6 frames, and that's all you want it to do there. And that'll always get added at 6 frames regardless of your preferences, and the reason because that's what the flow transition is. That's how it's designed to work. So if you're someone who has jump cuts, maybe you're editing a blog or a vlog somewhere, the flow transition, great way to hide those jump cuts, and that's what you'll see used most of the time. In my opinion, you should put B-roll there to cover it up and not have those kind of cuts, but if you have to have them, the flow transition can be a great one to hide those jump cuts. And that's the demo I wanted to show and some of the questions that came in. Again, if you have your own questions, don't hesitate. Send them to finalcutprohelp@me.com. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now, which is awesome. Let's see some spam coming in, which is fine. We will remove those, but you can't always win, and that's fine. Cool, and that should be everything that we need there. So let me switch over back to the keynote here, and we've seen our demo, we've seen the Q&A. As always, I like to close it out with a couple additional resources, and I got a new one for you this month, a new tag onto this. So as always, use that help menu. It's a great way to find answers to things, especially the new features. One of the things that Apple is really good at, in my opinion, is creating documentation and having that documentation available almost the second these products launch, in this case, an update to Final Cut. So when I was preparing for this video and this live stream and playing with these new features, I was a lot of times on the support site and using the manual for Final Cut to learn about these features. And so don't hesitate. Go to that help menu. You'll find out everything you need to know. If you can't find it there, you can use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram with the @FinalCutProHelp handle. You can also always leave a comment on these videos, and I will try to get back to you with whatever the question is. I'll try to get back to you with an answer. If I don't have the answer, which is very common, I'll try to find it for you, and if I can't find it, I might be able to point you in the direction of a resource that can help out with that. A lot of third-party things that are not Apple or not Final Cut, that are these different plugins and one-off things. I'm not going to be necessarily an expert on those, so I'll either try to find the answer, but if not, I'll hopefully find their support site for you to get them in that direction. As always, you can get directly to me using FinalCutProHelp@me.com. You can visit anawesomeguide.com. I don't have too much content on there, but that's the website that's linked to all this stuff. And then the new thing, by request, I set up a Patreon account. So you can go to patreon.com/FinalCutProHelp. If you want to support this channel, support what I'm doing, that's a great way to donate and send some money my way to keep me here on the site and creating content for you, as opposed to doing a day job where I'm not able to answer as quickly and create all this fun content with Final Cut. So that's what I got for you this month, last month of what a year we're in, 2018. So again, this is Final Cut Pro Help Live. This was episode 9. We were talking about the 10.4.4 update that came out this month, and I'm sure there's going to be some other fun things coming in the future, but for right now, those are the new updates. That's what we have for this year. Any questions you have, always post them, send them. Again, like every live stream, I don't have a topic set up for what I'm going to show next month. So if there's something specific you would like to see, or a general topic that you'd like me to cover in one of these live streams, just post it in the comments below or get a hold of me through FinalCutProHelp@me.com. And again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day in whatever you're doing, any of your editing. I hope it's good stuff. Try out the flow transition. Go through and try out things like Frame.io. You can get trials of that, and see what's out there. There's a lot of cool things. If you don't have anything else